See, I told you you'd enjoy fighting games, Ludo. What do you mean, why do you enjoy them? Well, that's a deep question, but the answer is the same as with any other game. There's one simple technique to make any and all games satisfying that just applied in a myriad of different ways. So let's dive into that today. Welcome to the Design Delve. So there are many different ways to make a game feel satisfying to play in the micro moments, using sound, VFX and animations to create powerful game feel for even the smallest actions. But what about the macro? How do we make an experience, the journey, satisfying beginning to end? Well, the answer is juxtaposition gratification. Now this is used everywhere, in everything. Honestly, after we've gone through this, pick your favourite game and I promise you can find it front and centre, if not your money back. Well, yeah, I know it's only like half a penny for their view, Ludo. It's a phrase of speech, you cheeky bitch. Nah, that doesn't work. Whatever. Now, we've touched on juxtaposition gratification before in past episodes, but it's time to give it its deserved diligence. Juxtaposition gratification is a term I coined years ago in my uni lecture days. It's a design technique where the player first needs to feel weak to eventually feel strong. There has to be chaos for order to land. There has to be defeat for success to be earned. It's the extreme juxtaposition of these conditions that makes the final outcome so satisfying. For the simplest example of this, we can look at puzzles. And by this I mean, well, puzzles. If you were to approach one that's 99% complete, with the final two pieces just sitting there waiting to be slotted in, there is little to no satisfaction to be had here because it's not the final completion itself that's so satisfying. It's the chaos of the 1,000-piece puzzle strewn across your table that makes the final formation of the Sonic and Mario shipping scene so satisfying, not because of its beauty, but because you took something from unintelligible chaos to order. Puzzle games emulate this from room to room, puzzle to puzzle. They present the player with a rule set to follow and then use obfuscation, extra pieces here or fake answers there to hide that final answer and distract the player. It's this obfuscation that makes the discovery of the answers so satisfying. Now, balancing this so it's satisfying rather than frustrating is another kettle of fish entirely, but the theory is still the same. You need to be confused for gaining knowledge to be satisfying. Juxtaposition? Next genre. RPGs. Alright. Well, RPGs are all about inhabiting a role. Narratively speaking, the hero's journey is just juxtaposition gratification over a character's arc, be it rising to the occasion, falling from grace and learning to climb back up. RPGs attempt to replicate this through gameplay. For example, as I've mentioned before, it would not be satisfying to load into a game for the first time and one-shot every enemy you find. Regardless of how satisfying the game feel was, that feeling would quickly dissipate because there is no mechanical challenge. But if you first struggle against these enemies, barely scraping by, but along your journey find rewards throughout the world, new weapons, levels, or even develop personal skill, you can come back to overpower those enemies that once gave you so much trouble. That juxtaposition of power is what makes acquiring new loot and overcoming challenges so satisfying. You must first show the player weakness for them to truly understand the weight of power. Like with Stardew Valley, everyone's favourite cozy game, the player's journey from grubby father to factory father is ruined if you remove the hardship of tending and nurturing your farm. Imagine loading into the game and simply just choosing the perfect farm. Imagine not having to actively learn about the NPC's wants and needs, and instead everyone instantly loved your himbo farmer Johnny Longcock. No hardship, no satisfaction. Juxtaposition gratification. What about fighting games? Well, they're skill-based, so the gratification loop is a little bit more complex to quantify. Because of the nature of 1v1 fighting games, we have no level increases or extrinsic rewards to give the illusion of power. There are no stats to increase apart from your own, in the grey. Here, the gratification comes from increasing your own skill at the game over time by mastering its systems, and because of this, those systems have to be complex, the depth of the skill ceiling being just out of reach to motivate the players to keep playing. Thinking about it, this might be why those games that utilize auto combos are so controversial in the fighting game community. It takes away from that built-up gratification of mastering these systems by making them more accessible, but is that worth it? Yeah, we'll let them decide. In general, it gets super tricky to manage all of this when you add more players. The two most common ways you see juxtaposition gratification implemented is either through complex systems or incremental substantive rewards to make the player more powerful over time. But in PvP games, like competitive shooters, giving players meaningful incremental power increases by their very nature make them more powerful than their lower level counterparts who've just started the game. This is a reinforcement loop, making the rich richer and the poor dead. Yeah, eat the rich. Gratifying for some, but frustrating for others. And yeah, it's true that these new players could overcome this, grinding and leveling to overcome this adversity, making that juxtaposition gratification even stronger, but in reality, it just leads to a lot of players quitting. So PvP games tend to rely on skill generation gratification instead. All games do this, just in slightly different ways, but they all do it. In their systems, items, narrative or skill development, it all comes back to this. Seriously, pick your favourite game and look. Minecraft? Finding diamonds never gets old because of this. Mechs in Helldivers 2. They're pretty simple to use and they're not exciting mechanically, let's be honest, but the juxtaposition gratification entrenched in their unlock method makes them so much better. Players knew that there were mechs in the game, they just didn't know how to unlock them or when they'd come, only for a surprise game-wide event to be announced, unlocking them for everyone. If they were in from the beginning of the game, they'd be far less satisfying to use because they were not earned by the community. Even Balatro, the wonderful poker roguelike, is drenched in this. First of all, the absurdity of roguelike upgrades is satisfying because of the build-up to that power from weakness. Finally defeating that boss is satisfying because of the failed runs, but it even extends into game feel. When you play a large hand and all of the Joker effects ring off, they subtly increase the speed per effect applied, slowly ramping up to insane speeds. Now, would this be as satisfying if it began at these ludicrous speeds? No, it's the build-up that makes it. On the topic of Balatro, if you're still not convinced of the addictive nature of juxtaposition gratification, I'll give you one more example to take to bed with you. Gambling. Slot machines. Yeah, loot boxes. Say no more, Ludo. Now, this is all well and good, but the problem is, what do we do when this satisfaction dries up? Some games naturally reset this loop by having different levels, like puzzle games. Roguelikes can introduce new items to increasingly mess with the core systems, but in more grounded single-player experiences, this is extremely hard. One way you could do this is by just allowing the player to become extremely powerful and then use that for the remainder of the game to live out that fantasy, or introduce new narrative threats that make more sense for the player's new power level, not just incrementally increasing bad guy health totals, because that just sucks ass. This is why you usually see the end boss in most JRPGs being literally God. See, there are too many ways that this is used for me to go over in one episode alone, especially since we're going to GDC in a couple days, but juxtaposition gratification keys into our intrinsic desires to grow and master our environment. Changing genres or target audience drastically changes how you approach it, but it's essential. In systems, items, narrative and skill development, it all comes back to juxtaposition gratification, and managing its delivery is the fine line between making your game satisfying or a slog. But what do you think? Go on then, which game did you pick as your favourite and how does it personally use juxtaposition gratification? Let us know down below because we would love to discuss this with you. For the last time, Ludo, I am not buying you a car. You don't even have thumbs. Alright, I'll ask them. If you enjoy this show and you want to keep it going, please consider checking out our Patreon to support the entire Second Wind team as we're entirely fan funded. See, Ludo, even if they give their $1 a month, you're still not getting a car. Whatever, say goodbye. Alright, bye guys.
This video is sponsored by Death Trick Double Blind, a non-linear detective visual novel out now on Steam and Nintendo Switch.